All right, so I am super excited to have Wade Tetsuka and Casey Benko with me today. This is our fourth now Payments Dialogue, and that we've hosted here at Spreedly. We love talking about these topics, and today what we want to talk about is level 2 and level 3 metadata, contextualize that in the context of level 1 metadata for credit card transactions. And maybe the best way to start out is just for the two of you to give a quick intro, what you do and why you care or know about L2 and L3 metadata.
Sure. Thanks, Nathaniel. So I'm founder and president of U.S. Transactions Corporation, and we are a merchant service provider, a credit card processing company. We specialize in merchants or clients that are transacting business-to-business transactions with credit cards. So they're accepting a lot of credit card payments, and it's business-to-business type of transactions. So like our clients do an average transaction size of like around $600 per transaction. So it's very different from a retail consumer type of transaction scenario. We don't have clients that are restaurants, retail stores, that type of stuff. So so that's why this topic of level 2 and level 3 detail is very relevant to us. And we'll get into some of that in more detail. But that's our background. We've been in business since 2009, and we really love what we do.
Cool. So Casey, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do every day?
Yeah, well, I'm the Director of IT here at U.S. Transactions Corp., and I come from a system integrations background. And more specifically, when it comes to payments, 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to have built with my boss at the time and myself an actual PCI compliant system to collect and store payments for the real estate industry. Mm-hmm. And it had over $100,000 of transactions a month. And I learned a lot when it comes to integrating with payment systems and the security around it. And luckily, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore when it comes to PCI compliance. So what I do at U.S. Transactions Corp. is, well, we have some very specific customers that can save a lot of money by implementing level 2 and level 3 data, but we don't want them to tear out their systems. So the goal here is, my goal is to find the path of least resistance to get them to be able to save that money without having to spend more than they save.
Right. Yeah, trying to find that ROI in implementations can be challenging sometimes. Yes. So we've been talking a lot about L2, L3 metadata. I mean, what is it? What are we actually talking about? Why are there levels? What types of data are we talking about? So talk a little bit about where it comes from and what it means.
Sure. So the different levels of data, level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 data is really the basic level of data that's required in order to process a credit card transaction. And I would say, 99%, certainly in the high 90% of all credit card transactions, just go through with level 1 data. What is that? Well, when you get your credit card statement, Nathaniel, at the end of the month, and you see all your credit card charges, right? And all you see on about all your charges, you only see 3 things, right? You see the date, the name of the merchant or wherever you shopped at, and the dollar amount of the transaction. That's it. That's all you know about all of your transactions for the month. That's level 1 data. And invariably, I'm sure you've had the situation where you see your credit card statement, and you see a charge on there from some merchant the name is, XYZ, Fun Factory, and you don't remember ever going to that store, right, or buying anything from a company online that had that name. So you're very confused, and you go, well, I didn't charge this, and now you're racking your brain, pulling your hair out. What was that? Right. I spent $1,500 for, $50 for, or whatever. So $59.99 or whatever. So level 1 data is the basic data the credit card transaction will go through, but it doesn't tell you a whole lot about what the transaction was. Level 2 and level 3 data is more enhanced data about the transaction, and credit cards that are for businesses, corporations, also what's called purchasing cards. These type of cards, it's not the type of card that you or I would use, Nathaniel, when we're going out shopping, or what your wife would use. It's the type of card that corporations would use, businesses would use. These cards are especially designed to accept more data about the transaction. So level 2 data will accept information about how much sales tax was charged for this transaction. What was the PO number for that transaction? That's level 2 data. And then level 3 data would even contain information that goes into every single line item of an invoice. So, just imagine that the line items of an invoice are replicated and sent to the credit card clearinghouse and to Visa and MasterCard, and then they're passed on to you, back to you as the card holder. So it's very information rich, tells you a lot about the transaction, but these are only done in a business-to-business type of transaction. But you can tell that from all of that rich data, if you are the card holder and you see all this extra information, you could be purchasing doing thousands of transactions as a business per month. This data is very important, because if all you have is date, name of merchant, and dollar amount, it's pretty darn hard to tell what it was for, right? Especially if there's no correlation to the name of the merchant and where you actually made the purchase.
So I want to dig some more into that, but just a question, like thinking about my own credit card statement. So, and even a little bit of more of what I've thought of as level 1. So some gateways and processors support a statement descriptor. The statement descriptor, I mean, that's kind of customization of the merchant name. Sometimes it's broken up into a few pieces. So that would be one piece of metadata. And then the other would be, a lot of times when I go and look at my credit card statement, I get sort of industry, like this was a travel purchase, or this was a retail purchase, or this was a fuel purchase. Where would those fit in metadata?
Right. So in metadata, that would be more like level 2 data, but not the complete like level 3 data. So you're right. But you also may want to check what type of, if that's like your personal credit card, or was that from your business?
That was my personal credit card. So I find and it's not always accurate either. Sometimes it's like, what? Like, no, I bought something in retail and it's showing up as travel. But the credit card company seems to be at least trying to show me, industry information when they're showing data transactions.
Right. But a consumer card in general definitely has limitations as to how much data it can capture and pass on to cardholders. So that is a big difference.
So you've kind of touched on this, but what types of businesses, and particularly think of the merchant side, not the using business side, but the merchant side that's being purchased from, what types of businesses does level 2 and level 3 data make the most sense for?
So the types of business that would make the most sense are businesses that are selling to other businesses. So we always refer to it as B2B, business to business type of enterprises. So it's not the restaurant, retail, traditional like retail businesses where it's like consumers going in and buying. It is more the business to business transactions. And so again, enterprises that are selling to other businesses. And Casey kind of referred to it in his introduction, but I mean, the really exciting and fun part for us, and where the impact of all this is when the seller or the merchant, as you refer to them, as we refer to them as in the industry, when they provide this extra level 3 data, it substantially lowers the fees that they pay, the Visa MasterCard fees that they pay into the banking industry by, close to 1%. So if you can imagine like $1 million worth of transactions over the course of a month or even a day. So it's not uncommon. We just had a conference with a few of our clients and potential clients, a presidential forum event, and one of our clients, they're saving like $400,000 a year in fees just because we moved them over to this level 3. But it's not uncommon to save $100,000 a year. I mean, so this is like real money. This is real money that they can take home to the bank, and it's their internal processes haven't changed. And I think Casey's later can talk to, from a IT perspective, how that happens.
Right.
Automate.
I guess what I'd be really curious about, so I imagine B2B, like, filling large purchase orders, et cetera. But one thing that I've had some exposure to is it seems like some travel companies, like companies that you would think of a salesperson or executive expensing things. So
Right.
Are there some sort of consumer/business crossover companies where this can make sense?
I mean, it would. I mean, at the end of the day, like a merchant or a seller, you could have some merchants or sellers, like you're saying, travel related companies that are actually like a mix. They're business to business and they're consumer.
Yep.
So what they end up doing is when they're processing a credit card transaction, they're really going to send level 3 data. They're going to try to send the full level 3 data for every transaction, because they really don't know at the other end of the phone or at the other end of the cash register, is the person going to use a corporate card or is the person holding a consumer credit card? So really, they're going to set up their systems so that they're passing level 3 data, this extra data, metadata, for every single transaction. It's just that the financial benefit for the merchant or seller is going to be to save money on their fees if that card was a corporate card or a purchasing card. They're not going to save any money if it was a consumer credit card. So, I mean, that's, you were asking from the merchants or sellers perspective, that's kind of that's really the impact for the merchant or seller, is the bottom line and saving money on their fees. Because if you were to ask a lot of merchants, what is one of your biggest line item expenses on the P&L? And, after rent and labor cost, credit card processing fees is often one of the biggest line items for organizations. We have also a lot of associations that are clients of ours, and it's a big piece of their P&L.
Right. So we've touched on it a few times. Obviously, y'all are making a great business here, so there must be ROI. But how does that ROI work out? When you think about technical implementations, you think about legacy payment systems. Casey, maybe you can talk a little bit just to what are the difficulties, what are the paths to actually an organization being able to implement this?
Oh, yeah, sure. First, I mean, let's just assume that we get past whether they can actually save money, whether the company collects enough from these payment cards and gets significant savings. And that's something that we could determine fairly quickly. What we then need to do is we need to see, does their gateway support it? And in many cases, no. So they would have to be willing to move to a gateway that supports level 3 payment. And that sometimes can be a bit of a hurdle. A lot of accounting departments really don't like that idea. And they also sometimes they have multiple systems that come into that gateway. And then we have to look, if they're willing to change their gateway, or if they have a gateway that supports level 3 payment, we have to look at the systems that they use. And this can be very cumbersome. Sometimes we get lucky in that they're collecting payments just over the phone, and they have huge volume that way. Not necessarily the most secure, but the easiest for us to implement. The next step is if they have automated systems that collect payment. Are those systems designed to be able to provide level 3? And in general, the answer is no.
Right.
And I mean, when I was designing systems for doing stuff like that, I wasn't thinking at that time, when I was abstracting out the payment model, that I should provide the payment processor line item details of an invoice. So at that point, really what most systems do is that they really just associate the transaction ID that they get from the payment processor back to the accounting system. So they have that level of just details so they could find out and trace the transactions. But that's nowhere near what needs to happen now. So we have to see if there's ways to get the system to change cost effectively into something that can supplement the level 3 data. And it really depends on the system. And on top of it, it depends on the gateway, because furthermore, the gateways collect level 3 payment data differently.
Mm-hmm.
Paytrace, which has a beautiful API that supports level 3 data, allows you to supplement level 3 data up to 24 hours past the transaction. Whereas other systems like PayFlow Pro, you have to be able to provide it at auth and capture. Wow. Some systems are auth or capture. And the devil really is in the details. And what we try to do is we try to find a solution for a particular combination of systems, and then try to find customers that fit that mold.
Yeah.
And Spreedly supports level 3 payment.
Yes.
So,
yes. Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting, right? Because one of the things we find, one of the reasons that Spreedly often engages with customers is various reasons they need to work with multiple gateways, or they want to shift to being able to interact with one gateway and be able to flexibly swap out what that gateway is. And I'd be curious, actually, if you have any companies. I mean, we were talking about companies, for instance, that do both consumer and business transactions. Do you have any companies that specifically route at level 3 business transactions into one backend and then route their consumer transactions into another backend?
No, there's really no need for that. We could do it like if it was really necessary, but I can't think of a use case as to why that would be necessary, because what happens is that if you send level 3 data to consumer credit card, it's just ignored.
Right.
It doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah, I was thinking more around they had lots of consumer volume, for instance, and they're looking to shift. They want to just move the level 3 stuff onto a gateway that actually supports it. So maybe that leads to my next question. That would be, how many gateways out there actually do support level 3 metadata in a way that you all actually find useful to implement? I mean, is it 10% of gateways? Is it 20%? How's that break down?
I would say that number is growing, Nathaniel, but 10% maybe to 20% tops, really. Yeah. So, and there's literally hundreds of different payment gateways or payment software products out there that Spreedly would know, because you guys connect in, over 100 of them. So it's really incredible how many options that the merchants have to choose from. It does create like a lot of confusion, because not all of those gateways are created equal. So I guess that is where we come in, is, we look at the landscape of here's all these payment gateways out there. Within Spreedly, there's 100 of them plus for them to choose. But really, if they're in this B2B space, out of those 100, there's only, less than 10% that they really should be looking at. And the other 90%, some of which are very common named gateways, a B2B enterprise should not even consider some of the more common payment gateways, even though it's well known and kind of a trusted name, let's say. It may not be designed for business to business transactions, because they're not certified to pass this level 3 data onto the Visa and MasterCard, into the clearing houses like First Data or TSYS or Payment Tech. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
When I get into this, I sometimes
I'm jumping around a little bit. There's this other topic that I'm really curious about, and that is, you think about this, we're talking about a lot of data, potentially pretty detailed financial data that's potentially being used in financial reconciliation. I would love to understand, just real high level, who gets yelled at if this data is wrong? Like, who finds out that it's wrong? How does it get corrected? Who has penalties if it's incorrect, et cetera?
Okay, good question. I mean, there's generally no penalties if the data is incorrect, except I should make an exception. We have seen cases where merchants are providing data in the sales tax field. So they might put sales tax information into a sales tax field when in fact there was no sales tax charged.
Oh.
Or where the buyer was sales tax exempt. So for example, we have quite a few. We have dozens of government contractors, companies that sell to the federal government. As you know, if you're selling to the federal government is not going to pay one iota, nickel, or penny of sales tax. Okay, and if they believe that you are charging them sales tax, you are in big doo-doo. Okay,
yeah.
So I mean, you're in big trouble. So if for any reason, like you have, you're sending data that might be putting in like a sales tax information into the field when in fact, there was no sales tax. I mean, then the cardholder would think that they're being charged sales tax, or the data that's coming back would indicate that there's some sales tax in the amount of the total charge, and that would lead to some problems, especially in a federal government type of situation. But generally, there's no real implication if there's something that's, let's say, incorrect or not completely accurate. However, if there is like missing data out of the level 3 fields, then it would cause the transaction to have a higher fee associated with it. So you don't benefit from the approximately 1% savings in credit card fees.
But basically, so it sounds like what prevents, say, a merchant who is eager for the discount but not eager for the work from just stuffing random data into the level 3 fields is really the fact that if that happens, the customer they're selling to is going to come back and yell at them because they're passing bogus L3 data. But it's not really the credit card network that's going to get that they're going to get in trouble with.
That's correct. That's what I've seen. So
yeah, it's fascinating, right? Because so much of how payments works has everything to do with risk and liability and who's actually culpable and responsible for different things. So I always find it interesting. You have these technical implementations, but there's all this business, machinations and who's responsible and who holds the buck stuff. So
right.
So the final question, like to kind of wrap this all up together, the final question I'd have for you is, say I'm a merchant and I have some B2B sales and I have maybe I have some B2C sales, or maybe I don't, but my volumes are growing. I have a gateway out there. Maybe I have a few software engineers around, or I have some cash I can go and spend with some folks like you. How do I know when, like, what are the triggers to go and look at this problem? When is it worthwhile for a business? What indicators should I be looking at as a business to go and say, we need to go and look at, L3 data? Because I'm assuming it's not something when you're a 2-person startup you really it's really worth worrying about. When does it become an issue, and what should folks be watching for?
Yeah, good question. So I think, when you start to see, obviously for a 2-person startup company, it's not going to be relevant. For a company that starts to see like a volume of, let's say, anywhere $100,000 of credit card sales per month. So let's say $1 million annually of credit card sales or more, you're going to want to start looking at how can I really save on the credit card fees, because now you're starting to pay a lot of money. $1 million, maybe a little bit even low, but let's say $3 to $5 million per year annual credit card receipts. You're going to want to start looking at how you want to save. If you start to see that, or if you're doing a lot of business to business transaction, you're going to want to have an expert like us take a look at 1 or 2 months of your merchant statements, the monthly statements that they get that itemize how much they're paying in fees. And we can tell from looking at those statements if they're doing level 3 processing or not. And we can, in 9 out of 10 cases, quantify pretty darn accurately down to the last, penny, how much they're going to save if they do convert to level 3 data. And then that's where the cases of the world come in to help them with the API integration, identifying what payment gateway is the right one to move to in order to be able to do level 3 data. And in many cases, the cost the cost is really not that much to implement for them with this level 3. So it sounds a lot more complicated than it actually really is. And I have a lot of clients that tell me, because we've been talking to them for 1 year, 2 years about doing this, after we've implemented it, they'd be coming back to me and saying, Wade, I'm so sorry, Wade, that we did not come to you a year ago or 2 years ago when you first approached us. It works so well and it's flawless, and it's exactly how you said it was going to be and what you promised. And I wish we could go there, but
Right, and you're like, well, I mean, I can only tell you were only hurting yourself.
Right, exactly. But everybody has to learn from their own experience, right?
Yeah.
I would like to add too that a great time from scheduling in order to think about implementing level 3 payments is when you're transitioning from legacy systems, because that's our biggest problem. It's the legacy systems, the custom one-offs that were made 10 years ago, and where we have companies that are now looking into getting a more productized solution, or off the shelf, and we can work with those easier because they're often more modular, and a lot of them are now starting to support level 3.
Yeah, and I would think any kind of transition point like that, obviously when things are already in flux and changing, sliding in L3, especially since it sounds like a pretty straightforward implementation, it could make a lot of sense versus having to spin up a whole organizational change cycle. Wait for one to happen and then get it in there. No, that's great. So I really appreciate y'all's time. I definitely learned some stuff. Now I'm thinking, do we need to go and look at whether we should be passing L3 metadata? So well done. And I'm sure a lot of other folks watching this are going to be asking themselves the same question. Really appreciate having you guys on, and want to thank everyone who's watching this and following along with these payments dialogues. So thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Nathaniel.